The small hand clamped onto DeMarco Washington's leather vest like a vice. He looked down, ready to brush off whatever rich kid thought tugging on a biker made for entertainment. Instead, he found himself staring into the most terrified eyes he'd ever seen on a 9-year-old. "You're in danger," the little girl whispered, her voice steady despite the fear radiating off her in waves. "Pretend I'm your child. Right now. Please." DeMarco's heart stopped. 47 years on this earth, 12 in the Marines, 8 in prison, 27 in a motorcycle club, had taught him to recognize real fear. This wasn't imagination. This wasn't games. This child was drowning, and she'd grabbed the only piece of driftwood in sight. He didn't hesitate. Dropping to one knee, DeMarco pulled her close, his massive hand cradling the back of her braided head. "Hey there, baby girl," he said, loud enough for the wedding guests nearby to hear. His voice came out rough, unfamiliar with tenderness. "You having a good time?" The girl's body trembled against his chest. Around them, crystal chandeliers threw light across 200 people who had no idea the world had just tilted sideways. Classical music kept playing. Champagne kept flowing. White women in silk dresses kept laughing at jokes that weren't funny. And DeMarco Washington, the family embarrassment in his Hell's Angels vest and neck tattoos, became the only thing standing between this child and whatever nightmare she'd seen coming. "Better now, Daddy," she whispered back, and the word hit him like a punch to the throat. If you're already feeling the weight of this moment, hit that subscribe button. Stories like this take time to craft, and your support keeps them coming. Turn on notifications so you don't miss what happens next, because what Zara tells DeMarco in the next few seconds will change everything. Drop a comment with your thoughts. Let's build a community that doesn't just watch, but feels together. DeMarco kept his face calm, kept playing the role, but his eyes swept the Pennsylvania wedding hall with predatory focus. The Riverside estate wore its money like armor, floor-to-ceiling windows, pink roses that cost more than his motorcycle payment, guests who smelled like old wealth and new privilege. He didn't belong here. Never had. His niece getting married was the only reason security hadn't thrown him out on sight. They'd checked his invitation twice, watched him like he might steal the silverware. The mothers had pulled their children closer when he walked past. Except this one. This little girl with skin like polished mahogany and braids pulled so tight they had to hurt, she'd run straight to him. "Talk to me," DeMarco breathed into her hair, still holding her like they'd done this 1,000 times. "What did you see?" "The man with the accent," she whispered, each word precise, controlled. 3 tables over. Gray suit. Expensive watch. He's not here for the wedding. DeMarco's gaze tracked across the reception hall. Found him immediately. Thick build, cold eyes, hands that looked too soft for honest work. The kind of dangerous that wore designer labels and stayed just inside the law. "What's he here for?" DeMarco asked, though ice was already forming in his gut. "Me." 2 syllables. 1 word. A lifetime of terror compressed into a single breath. The girl, she couldn't be more than 9, pressed closer. "Yesterday. In the car. Daddy thought I was asleep. I heard him on the phone with that man. Talking about insurance money. $3 million. Saying families like ours don't do divorces. Saying there are cleaner ways to solve problems." DeMarco's blood turned to permafrost. He'd seen evil. Fought it in Fallujah. Survived it behind bars where men killed over cigarettes and disrespect. He'd left bodies in desert sand and prison yards, done things that woke him up screaming. But this? A father selling his daughter's life for insurance money? At a wedding? Surrounded by 200 witnesses who'd never suspect a thing. "Where's your mother?" DeMarco asked, his voice steady despite the rage building behind his ribs. "Rehab. 3rd time this year." The girl's voice cracked, just slightly. "Nobody listens when I try to tell them things. I'm just the weird kid. The one who reads too much, worries too much, imagines too much. But you. She pulled back just enough to look at his face. You were watching. You see things they don't. She was right. DeMarco had been watching. Not the happy couple or the expensive decorations or the photographer capturing moments that would look perfect in albums nobody would open. He'd been watching the edges. The spaces between the smiles. The places where the light didn't quite reach. That's where the truth always lived. Movement caught his eye. The man in the gray suit, Victor something, Russian or Ukrainian by the look of him, had stood up. Buttoning his jacket. Could mean nothing. Could mean bathroom break or phone call or stretching his legs. Could mean he was moving into position. What's your name? DeMarco asked. Zara. Zara what? Patterson. DeMarco's mind raced. Patterson. Marcus Patterson. The name clicked, his sister had mentioned him. Investment banker. Old family money. The kind of man who saw people as assets and problems as numbers to be solved. The kind of man who might look at his own daughter and see 3 million reasons to call a cleaner. I'm DeMarco, he said, keeping his voice low, his body language relaxed for anyone watching. And I need you to trust me for the next 5 minutes. Can you do that? Zara nodded against his shoulder. Good girl. DeMarco shifted her weight on his hip, settling her more comfortably. To the wedding guests drifting past, they looked like father and daughter having a moment. To DeMarco, she felt like every promise he'd ever broken, every chance at redemption he'd thrown away, every brother he'd buried because he wasn't fast enough or smart enough or careful enough. Not this time. Not this kid. Victor was moving through the crowd now. Casual. Unhurried. But his path had purpose, geometry, the inevitable angle of a predator who'd already chosen his prey. Across the room, Marcus Patterson stood too. Phone pressed to his ear, but his eyes tracked his daughter with the cold calculation of a man checking off a business transaction. He wore a smile that didn't reach anywhere real, the kind of expression that cost thousands to perfect in boardrooms and country clubs. DeMarco had known men like him in prison. White-collar criminals who thought rules applied to other people. Who believed money could wash away any sin, solve any problem, bury any body deep enough that it didn't matter. They were always shocked when the consequences found them anyway. Here's what's going to happen, DeMarco murmured, starting to walk toward the main exit. His pace stayed easy. Relaxed. Just a dad and his daughter, maybe getting some air, maybe heading to the bathroom. Nothing to see here. In about 30 seconds, I'm going to make a scene. When I do, you run to the kitchen. Find the walk-in freezer and lock yourself inside. Don't open it for anyone but me or a cop wearing a badge. Understand? Why are you helping me? Zara's voice came out small, genuinely confused. DeMarco's throat tightened. Because you were brave enough to ask. Because I know what it's like when nobody believes you. Because some things matter more than fitting in. They were 15 feet from the exit when Victor stepped into their path. His smile was professional. Practiced. The kind that had probably closed deals and opened doors and convinced people to trust him right up until the moment he destroyed them. Excuse me, friend. That accent, definitely Russian. I think you have someone else's daughter. DeMarco's smile back was all teeth and violence barely restrained. Funny thing about that. Daddy, I don't feel good. Zara's voice cut through, louder now, pitched perfectly for the guests turning to look. She pressed a hand to her stomach, her face scrunching up. My tummy hurts. Perfect. The kid was perfect. It's okay, sweetheart. DeMarco kept his eyes on Victor while addressing Zara. Let's get you some air. Victor's hand shot out, gripping DeMarco's forearm. Not aggressive enough to draw attention, but firm enough to send a message. Her father asked me to check on her. He's concerned. DeMarco looked down at that hand. Soft fingers. Manicured nails. Not a single callus or scar. Then he looked back up at Victor's face. "Remove your hand," DeMarco said quietly, "or I'll remove it for you. And I won't be gentle about where I put it afterward." Something flickered in Victor's eyes. Recognition, maybe. The understanding that he'd grabbed a wolf by the collar thinking it was a dog. But he didn't let go. "Gentlemen, is there a problem?" Marcus Patterson materialized beside them, all concern and fatherly worry. He reached for Zara. "Baby, what's wrong? Come to Daddy." Zara's entire body went rigid in DeMarco's arms. Her fingers dug into his vest hard enough to hurt. That was all the confirmation he needed. "Your daughter's fine," DeMarco said, shifting Zara away from Marcus's reaching hands. "Just need some air. I'll take her outside." "I'm sorry, who are you?" Marcus's voice carried just the right note of confused parent protecting his child. Around them, more guests were turning, sensing drama more interesting than overpriced food and tired speeches. DeMarco felt the trap closing. In about 10 seconds, someone would call security. He'd get thrown out. Zara would get handed back to her father. And whatever Marcus and Victor had planned would proceed right on schedule: tragic accident, grieving family, insurance payout. Unless he changed the game entirely. "I'm someone who heard your phone conversation yesterday," DeMarco lied, his voice carrying across the suddenly quiet reception hall. "The one about insurance policies and cleaner solutions. Want me to repeat it? Or should we involve the police now and save everyone some time?" Marcus's face went white. Then red. Then carefully, dangerously blank. "I have no idea what you're talking about." His voice stayed level, but his eyes promised murder. "You're clearly drunk or confused. Probably both. Now give me my daughter before I have you arrested for kidnapping." "Daddy, no." Zara's scream cut through the wedding like a knife. "Don't make me go with him. Please. He's going to hurt me." The room exploded into chaos. Women gasped. Men stood up. The security guard who'd checked DeMarco's invitation twice started pushing through the crowd. The bride, DeMarco's niece, stood frozen at the head table, her perfect day dissolving into nightmare. DeMarco had maybe 15 seconds before this ended badly. He used 10 of them to look directly at his niece. "Shayla. I know I've been nothing but disappointment to this family. I know showing up here was probably a mistake. But I'm asking you to trust me one time. Just once. Something's wrong here. This child is in danger. And if you love me at all, if you've ever believed I was anything other than the screw-up everyone says I am, you'll tell security to stand down for 5 minutes while we figure this out." Shayla's eyes went wide. Her new husband whispered something urgent in her ear. Her mother, DeMarco's sister, stood up, shaking her head, already apologizing to the guests. But Shayla held up one hand. "Wait," she said. That single word carried enough authority to freeze the security guard mid-stride. Shayla stepped down from the head table, her wedding dress whispering across hardwood floors. She walked straight to Zara, crouched down in her $1,000 gown, and looked the little girl directly in the eyes. "Sweetie, I don't know you, but I know my uncle. He's a lot of things: stubborn, rough around the edges, terrible at family gatherings, but he's not a liar. If he says something's wrong, something's wrong. So I'm going to ask you one question, and I need you to tell me the truth. Okay?" Zara nodded, tears streaming down her face now. "Do you feel safe going home with your father tonight?" The question hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Zara looked at Marcus. Then at Victor. Then back at Shayla. "No," she whispered. "I heard them. They're going to make it look like an accident. For the insurance money. Because $3 million is worth more than I am. This is the moment everything changes. If you're feeling what I'm feeling right now, that gut punch realization that sometimes the monsters don't hide under the bed, they sit at the dinner table, take a second to like this video. Share it with someone who needs to hear this story. Comment below with your thoughts, because your voice matters. Your engagement helps stories like Zara's reach people who need them most. And subscribe with notifications on, because what happens next will restore your faith in humanity, even when it feels impossible. Let's keep this community strong. Together. Marcus's face transformed. The concerned father mask shattered, revealing something cold and calculating underneath. "This is insane," he said, but his voice had changed too. Harder now. Sharper. "Shayla, I'm sorry your uncle is causing a scene at your wedding, but my daughter has been having behavioral issues. Acting out. Making up stories for attention ever since her mother went to rehab. I've been working with therapists. Then you won't mind waiting for the police to sort it out." Shayla's voice cut through his explanation like wire through butter. She pulled out her phone. "In fact, I'm calling them right now." Victor moved. Not toward Zara. Toward the exit. Fast, but not fast enough to draw too much attention. Just a guest deciding the drama wasn't worth staying for. Reaper. DeMarco used his road name without thinking. He's running. But the security guard was faster. Younger. Clearer path. He caught Victor's arm just as the man reached the main entrance. "I don't think anyone's leaving just yet," the guard said. He'd gone from checking invitations to playing hero, and DeMarco could see him running through scenarios in his head, calculating risk and reward. Smart kid. Victor's hand dipped toward his jacket. "Gun." DeMarco's voice boomed across the reception hall. He spun, putting his body between Zara and the threat, covering her completely. Women screamed. Men dove under tables. The string quartet stopped playing mid-note. But Victor didn't pull a weapon. He pulled a passport. "I am diplomatic consultant," he said, his accent thicker now, stress cracking his careful English. "I have immunity. You cannot hold me." "Diplomatic consultant for who?" Shayla demanded, still holding her phone. "Doing what?" Victor's smile was thin and sharp as a razor blade. "For people who solve problems your courts cannot. Your lawyers cannot. People who understand that sometimes, family matters require creative solutions." The words hung in the air like confession and threat combined. Marcus had gone absolutely still. Calculating. Running numbers. Assessing angles. DeMarco could practically see the spreadsheet running behind his eyes, chance of exposure versus chance of talking his way out, cost of failure versus cost of cutting losses. "I want a lawyer," Marcus said finally. "I'm not saying another word without legal representation. And someone get my daughter away from that criminal before he traumatizes her further." "Criminal?" DeMarco's laugh came out harsh. "Yeah, I've done time. Yeah, I've made mistakes. But I never looked at a child and saw a profit margin." Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. Zara's small voice cut through the tension. "Daddy kept spreadsheets. In his office. Red folder on the bottom shelf behind the law books. Dates and numbers and emails with Mr. Markov," she pointed at Victor, "and insurance forms with my name on them. I took pictures with my tablet. Just in case nobody believed me." The room went silent. Marcus Patterson's face drained of all color. Even Victor looked impressed, in a detached, professional sort of way. "You took pictures," DeMarco repeated, something like pride swelling in his chest. "When?" "Last week. I knew something was wrong. Daddy kept having meetings in his office and telling me to go upstairs. But the air vent in my room connects to his office, and sound carries. I heard him talking about policy payouts and staged accidents and making it look natural. So I snuck in when he went to the gym and documented everything. Then I backed it up to the cloud, because I read once that evidence needs redundancy. Zara said all of this in the same calm, precise voice she'd used to tell DeMarco he was in danger. Like she'd prepared for this moment. Rehearsed it. Known it was coming and armed herself the only way a 9-year-old could. With information. Documentation. Truth. DeMarco looked at this little girl who'd grabbed a stranger's vest and gambled everything on the hope that someone would finally listen, finally believe, finally care enough to stand between her and the monsters wearing familiar faces. "You're the bravest person I've ever met," he said. Zara's eyes filled with tears. "I was so scared nobody would help." "I know, baby girl. I know." The police arrived in a cascade of blue lights and official voices demanding to know what happened. Shayla stepped up, still in her wedding dress, and gave a statement that was clear and damning and backed up by 200 witnesses who'd heard Victor's slip about creative solutions, and Marcus's immediate demand for a lawyer. The lead detective, a black woman in her 40s with eyes that had seen too much, listened to Zara's story, looked at DeMarco's record pulled up on her phone, and made a decision. "Mr. Washington, I'm going to need you to stick around for questioning." But, she glanced at Zara, who was still tucked against his side. "Given the circumstances, I think we can conduct that interview somewhere the young lady feels safe. How about you two come down to the station together? We'll get her statement, verify her evidence, and figure out what happens next." "What about him?" DeMarco nodded toward Marcus, who stood surrounded by officers now, his expensive suit suddenly looking like a costume. "Mr. Patterson is being detained for questioning regarding conspiracy to commit murder. If Miss Zara's evidence supports her claims, he'll be formally arrested." The detective's voice was professional, but her eyes burned with quiet fury. "And Mr. Markov is being held on immigration violations pending investigation into his diplomatic credentials. Turns out the consulate has no record of a Victor Markov working in any official capacity. Fake diplomat. Contract killer. Problem solver for rich people with messy situations." DeMarco had been right about him from the start. The detective crouched down to Zara's level. "You did good, sweetheart. Really good. Most adults don't have the courage to do what you just did. Will I have to go back to him?" Zara's voice trembled. "Even if you arrest him, eventually he gets bail, right? And then what? I go home and pretend everything's fine?" The detective's face softened. "We'll contact Child Protective Services. Get an emergency protective order. You won't be going anywhere near your father until this is fully investigated. Is there other family? Your mother? Still in rehab? And she?" Zara's voice trailed off. "She doesn't believe me about things. She thinks I'm too dramatic. That I make up stories for attention." "What about your dad's family?" the detective asked. "Or your mom's?" Zara shook her head. "Daddy's parents are dead. Mom's parents live in Florida, but they're really old. I haven't seen them in years." DeMarco felt his chest tighten. This kid had saved her own life, exposed her father's murder plot, helped police catch a contract killer, and she still had nowhere safe to land. The system would put her in foster care. Some stranger's house where she'd be one more case file, one more placement, one more kid nobody really wanted. "What if she stayed with me?" The words came out before DeMarco's brain could stop them. Everyone turned to stare. "I'm sorry, what?" The detective's eyebrows climbed toward her hairline. DeMarco knew how this looked. Convicted felon. Biker. Covered in tattoos and criminal history. Wanting to take home a 9-year-old girl he'd met 20 minutes ago. Temporary, he added quickly. Just until you sort out permanent placement. I know I'm not exactly father of the year material, but she trusts me. And I've got a clean place, steady work, and I've been out of trouble for 6 years. Plus my sister," he gestured at Shayla, whose wedding had turned into a crime scene, "lives 10 minutes away. She can supervise. Make sure everything's appropriate. The detective looked at Shayla. You'd be willing to vouch for your brother? Shayla bit her lip. DeMarco could see her running through their history, every missed birthday, every broken promise, every time he'd chosen the club over family. Every reason to say no. Yeah, she said finally. I'd vouch for him. DeMarco's made mistakes, but he's never hurt anyone who didn't deserve it. And he's never once broken a promise to a child. She paused. Mostly because he never made any. But if he's making one now, he'll keep it. The detective looked at Zara. What do you think, honey? Would you feel safe staying with Mr. Washington while we investigate? Zara's grip on DeMarco's vest tightened. Yes. Please. I don't want to go with strangers. I'm technically a stranger, DeMarco pointed out, trying to be honest. No, Zara said firmly. You're the person who believed me. That makes you family. Something inside DeMarco's chest cracked open. Some sealed-off place where hope used to live before prison and loss and bad choices had buried it under scar tissue. All right, the detective said, though her expression suggested this was against her better judgment. Temporary emergency placement with Mr. Washington, supervised by, she looked at Shayla. Shayla Martinez. And yes, I know my wedding just became a police investigation, but honestly, this is the most important thing that happened here today. She looked at her new husband, who nodded agreement. We'll need background checks, home inspection, the works, the detective warned. And I'm assigning a social worker to check in daily. If anything, and I mean anything, seems off, Zara gets pulled immediately. Understood, DeMarco said. He looked down at Zara, this little girl who'd gambled everything on a stranger's willingness to care, and made the first promise he'd made in 6 years. I've got you. However long it takes, whatever you need. You're safe now. Zara nodded, tears streaming down her face. Thank you, Daddy. The word stabbed through him. She'd called him that for cover at first. Protection. Performance. But this time, it sounded different. This time, it sounded real. We're almost to the end, and if you're still here, you're part of something special. This community doesn't just consume content, we care about the stories we share and the lessons they teach. If Zara's courage moved you, if DeMarco's choice to stand up reminded you that one person can make a difference, let me know in the comments. Share a time when someone believed you when nobody else did. Or a time you wish someone had. Your stories matter. They inspire others. And they remind us all that we're not alone in this broken, beautiful world. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because there's more to this story, and you won't want to miss how it ends. 3 months later, DeMarco stood in family court wearing the most uncomfortable suit he'd ever owned. His lawyer, provided pro bono by a firm that specialized in cases like Zara's, had coached him on what to say, how to act, what to emphasize. But when the judge asked him why he wanted permanent custody of a child he barely knew, DeMarco ignored all of it. Because she's the best thing that ever happened to me, he said simply. Because she's smart and brave and she deserves someone who sees that. Because I've spent 47 years being the worst version of myself, and she makes me want to be better. And because when she had to choose between staying silent and risking everything on the chance that someone might care, she chose to believe in people anyway. That kind of courage deserves to be protected. Celebrated. Given every possible chance to grow into whatever she's meant to become. The judge, an older black woman with silver hair and eyes that had seen every variation of family court tragedy, studied him for a long moment. Mr. Washington, your record is extensive. Violence. Drug charges. Association with criminal organizations. Give me one reason why I should believe you're capable of providing a stable home for a child. DeMarco met her eyes. Because everything in that record came from a life where nobody believed in me. Where I was told I was worthless so many times I started believing it. Where the only family I found was with people as broken as I was. But Zara? His voice cracked. Zara looks at me like I'm capable of being a hero. And I'll be damned if I waste that. The judge's expression didn't change. And if I grant this petition, you understand that the standards are higher for you than for most parents? That any slip, any association with your former life, would be grounds for immediate removal? Yes, ma'am. You understand that raising a 9-year-old girl means school conferences and braces and boys in about 4 years that you'll want to intimidate but legally cannot threaten? Yes, ma'am. You understand that her father is currently awaiting trial for conspiracy to commit murder, and that trial will be traumatic, public, and potentially dangerous? Yes, ma'am. And I'll be there for every second of it. Whatever she needs. The judge looked at Zara, who sat in the front row between Shayla and the social worker who'd been checking in daily. Miss Patterson, do you want Mr. Washington to be your father? Zara stood up, smoothing her dress. He already is. I just want it to be official. The judge's lips twitched. Almost a smile. The court grants permanent custody to Mr. DeMarco Washington, with standard oversight and review in 6 months. Congratulations. Try not to mess this up. DeMarco's knees nearly buckled. Zara ran to him, threw her arms around his waist, and held on like she'd never let go. We did it, Daddy, she whispered. No, baby girl, DeMarco said, his voice thick with emotion. You did it. You saved yourself. I just showed up. You did more than show up. You believed me. And that, DeMarco realized, was the entire point. Sometimes courage wasn't about being fearless. Sometimes it was about being terrified and asking for help anyway. About trusting that somewhere in a world full of people who looked away and stayed silent, there might be one person willing to stand up. Outside the courthouse, news cameras waited. Marcus Patterson's trial had become national news. Wealthy banker plots daughter's murder, foiled by biker at wedding. The headlines wrote themselves. But DeMarco didn't care about cameras or attention. He just kept walking, Zara's hand in his, toward the motorcycle he'd parked 2 blocks away. Daddy? Zara looked at the bike with wide eyes. I've never ridden on one of those. DeMarco grinned. First time for everything. Besides, you trusted me with your life once already. What's a motorcycle ride compared to that? He helped her into the helmet, child-sized, because he'd bought it the day after that first night, just in case. Helped her onto the seat behind him. Felt her arms wrap around his waist. Hold on tight, he said. Always, Zara promised. And as DeMarco kicked the engine to life and pulled into traffic, he thought about the man he'd been 3 months ago. Alone. Angry. Convinced he'd used up all his chances at redemption. That man would never have believed that a 9-year-old's whisper could change everything. But Zara had taught him something more important than second chances or redemption or any of the other words people used when they talked about transformation. She'd taught him that sometimes the people who need saving do the saving themselves. They just need someone willing to stand beside them while they do it. Someone willing to believe. Someone willing to stay. If you made it to the end of this story, you're exactly the kind of person this channel is for. People who don't just scroll past, who actually care about the message behind the moment. Zara and DeMarco's story isn't just entertainment. It's a reminder that courage comes in unexpected forms, that family isn't always blood, and that sometimes the most broken people become the best heroes. If this story touched you, changed you, or reminded you of something important, subscribe and turn on those notifications. There are more stories coming that will challenge you, inspire you, and make you see the world differently. Drop a comment sharing what this story meant to you. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Let's build a community that doesn't just watch stories, we live them, share them, and use them to become better versions of ourselves. Hit that like button, share this with someone who needs hope, and I'll see you in the next one. Because every story matters. And so do you.